This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment, with me, your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things metaphysical and spiritual, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. So come with me on this enlightening experience as I interview metaphysical and spiritual experts as we discuss and debate and delve deep into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
We welcome you to the World Awakenings podcast. Before we start, we'd like to tell you about a special ebook written by the show's host, Carl Gruber. The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. The concise 32-page 3 Pillars ebook will teach you how to become a successful and consistent co-creator of your life path with the law of attraction. Yes, you can manifest the life you truly desire, and the ebook is absolutely free. Simply go to Carl's website, carlgruberlifecoach.com. That's KARLGRUBER lifecoach.com. Click on the header title About Me and get the free download today. Carl Gruber's free ebook, The 3 Pillars, will positively change your life.
May I have your attention, please? The podcast, World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment, is now on the air. May I have your attention, please? The podcast, World Awakenings, is now on the air. Yes, welcome once again, everybody, to episode number 25 of this podcast, World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. And as my viewers and listeners know, for over a year and a half, close to 2 years, we've been doing this. We investigate and delve deeply into all things spiritual and metaphysical. And over the last those number of months, we've had some of the finest teachers in the world here. And of course, we always dwell mainly on the teachings of the modern spiritual guide, A Course in Miracles. And one thing I like about A Course in Miracles, line 1, page 1, the very first line is, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And that applies to having the guest show up today that I have here, and it's just amazing. It's a miracle he's here. We have Dr. Robert Rosenthal, and he is the co-president of the Foundation of Inner Peace, and that, of course, is the authorized publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now, Dr. Bob has served on the Foundation's board of directors since 1993. What I find this is really cool. He was introduced to the course in 1975 at the age of 20, and we'll find out more about that from Bob himself. That I'm sure that's a great story right there. He's also an author. I just got this yesterday. I wish I had a chance to read more. This is one of his books, and it's pretty awesome so far, what I read, From Nevermind to Evermind, Transforming the Self to Embrace Miracles. And his new book, which I believe, I'm not even sure if it's out yet, From Loving One to One Love, Transforming Relationships Through A Course in Miracles. And I'm sorry, is that out, Bob? Is that out?
That is out. It was released in February, and people seem to like it. Yeah, go figure. No.
Well, and that's these 2 books that I just mentioned. Like I said, I held this up again, but I'll do it again because it's such a great book. Although it doesn't it disappears into the ocean.
I was going to say, well, that's a metaphor for how we transform.
Well, let me ask you this. How does a person like you, who, let's see, I have my little notes here, who is a board certified psychiatrist, a former assistant clinical professor of psychiatry, go to become the co-president of a foundation for inner peace? How did this all happen for you?
Well, I think someone up there had the plan laid out from a very early point. So you kind of hit on it in the introduction. I was introduced to A Course in Miracles over the Christmas vacation of my junior year of college.
Mm-hmm.
So when I entered medical school, I was already a very, very dedicated course student. And you know, as these things go, I've explored many other spiritual paths. My first wife was, she came from a very Catholic family, Jesuit brother. She just couldn't get past the Christian language of A Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
As a Jew, I certainly had my own issues with it, but I'd also had a lot of very powerful experiences. So I knew this was my path. Plus, you know, I was living in the apartment where it was published from in '76 when it first came out.
Oh.
So I had the great privilege of knowing Bill very well. I'm seeing and meeting Helen and Bill many, many, many times. But I don't think I registered on Helen's radar. I was just that college student taking physics at Columbia and living there. But Bill and I had an immediate connection. So that really plugged me into the course. So I actually entered medical school with that already in mind. And I really do feel like my entire career was just training in so many respects for where I finally wound up. But that said, just to be clear, it's not like I was thinking for 40 years, oh, I can't wait till I get to the Foundation for Inner Peace. Judy Whitson's husband, Bill Whitson, asked me probably, 10 years before I actually joined,
Mm-hmm.
if I might consider it, because he said it's a good job and you'd be perfect for it. At the time I was, happy in my psychiatry practice. I was writing screenplays.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I told him, nah, not interested. Happy to be on the board. This is not for me. And, in the fullness of time, it came around. But as a psychiatrist, I learned quite a bit. Remember, Helen and Bill, the two scribes, the co-scribes, were academic psychologists and very tapped into that world. So understanding the concepts that the Course uses, I think was very important for me in learning and in teaching it. So for example, in chapter 5 of From Nevermind to Evermind, the book you just held up, which by the way is I wrote it for both dedicated, seasoned students and people who knew nothing about A Course in Miracles. I did not use the language of A Course in Miracles except in quotes. Quotations from it. But in chapter 5 of that book, I go into an understanding that could only have come to me through my psychiatry work of how it could be possible that we all seem to be here in our own separate individual lives and bodies, and yet we're all part of this oneness of love and peace that is the Son of God. Very tough concept to get your hands around, but there is a psychiatric condition that helps explain it.
I do want to go back just for a second, just because I find it really fascinating that I think you and I maybe are similar in age, because let's see, this was the early 70s when you met Bill Thetford, right? When you were an undergrad student?
76.
76, mid 70s. So at 20 years old, that it just had to be. You probably didn't even know what to think at first when you found out about it from Bill Thetford.
Well, no, I was actually introduced to it by Judy. Judy Sketch-Whitson, who was, the person who published it. And her son and I were college roommates, which is how we came into this.
Oh, yeah.
I was very much on a spiritual path already. I was into the Carlos Castaneda books.
Yes, I read them all too. Yeah.
You've been there? Okay.
Yeah.
People of a certain age. I was very into the Seth channeling.
I've read all those, yes. Mm-hmm.
So when I met my roommate's mother, Judy, she was also very into Seth. She hadn't gotten A Course in Miracles yet. Mm-hmm. We had this great conversation on a visit to her son. And therefore, when A Course in Miracles came into her life on one of her phone calls with her son, she said, "Hey, put Bob on." And she said, "I've got this thing I need to show you." And, I was a college student. I was like, yeah, okay, great, whenever. And it took another 6 months, of course, before I was in New York and she showed it to me. And I actually had a very mixed reaction. I recognized it immediately as like this, pow right between the eyes truth. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Like, wow. And I was also very resentful of it because in the Seth teachings, we're these beautiful individual souls. We incarnate, we learn, we die, we incarnate again. We're spiritual adventurers, all of which was really appealing to me. And here's A Course in Miracles saying, well, no, that's basically all still within the illusion, and you're just the Son of God, this oneness. And I probably would not have taken up the course if I didn't have, over the next couple of months, a series of some pretty, compelling, what I would call miracles. But the first one was the very night that I got the course, where I actually, to make long stories short, and I have told this one a number of times at this point, where with my friend, Judy's son and his sister, who now runs the foundation with me, and a guy named Ralph Blum, who at the time was a science fiction writer, but then went on to do this series of divination called The Runes, which some of you may be familiar with. I still am fond of them. We all wound up in church on Christmas Eve, and with no volition of my own, I sort of got pulled into this vortex and wound up in the communion line, and thinking, what is a Jew doing in a communion line on Christmas Eve?
I was just thinking that too. Yeah,
this has to be sacrilege, right? But when I got up there, the woman who handed me, I think it was just like a little slice of pita bread, and I was like, that's it. But she said some words, and I don't recall what they were. I think it was something to the effect of, God will be with you, or God is with you, words that have been very powerful for me since. And the entire church filled up with white light. I mean, I'd not experienced anything like that before. I also noted that this woman, who to me was like glowing, hadn't said anything to anyone in front of me, didn't say anything to anyone in back of me. And it just felt like kind of a signal, hey, it's not a coincidence. You saw this book that was supposedly channeled or scribed, I should say, not channeled, by, Jesus of Nazareth in his current realization as the one Son of God. And here you are in a church on Christmas Eve. Very strange. Maybe I'll give it another chance and start working with it.
It was a miracle.
Yeah.
Wow, what a story. That's interesting, Bob, because we all have our different journey coming to our spiritual path and enlightenment, because in the mid-'70s, I was just a hippie, just partying, listening to Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, man. Yeah, let's go party, and then I found it later on in, middle life. So that is an amazing story. So your career in psychiatry, did that parallel with the teachings? They say, I have not read the psychiatry book.
Psychotherapy manual.
What is it called?
Psychotherapy, Purpose, Process, and Practice. We just call it the Psychotherapy Manual. It was a supplement to A Course in Miracles that Helen Schuckman scribed after the course was finished. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it's oriented towards psychotherapists, because to some degree it is, but it also makes very clear we're all psychotherapists, because we're all screwed up in our minds. And we all are, in a sense, doing therapy with ourselves and with everyone else we know. So yeah, that in that manual. I mean, I went through training. I mean, I got interested in certain aspects of the field. I learned a great deal that has absolutely benefited me in terms of understanding A Course in Miracles. But I can't say I really used the Course in my practice, although in maybe the last, I don't know, 8-10 years of my practice, I became very aware that it wasn't me doing the work. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that mentally I would just give each session to the Holy Spirit,
Yes.
to go wherever it goes. And, as St. Francis said, God, please make me an instrument of thy peace. I had a lot of learning, a lot of training. This is all important because we each have to understand that we have a quote unquote special role that the Holy Spirit gives us. It's not special in the sense that it's better than anyone else or worse than anyone else. It's just, your life experience, your learning puts you in a unique position to reach others and to do your forgiveness work in ways that nobody else can do it. And, the Course sort of jokes, you asked for specialness as a replacement for love.
Right.
Well, here it is, we're giving it to you. So there's this beautiful kind of, the way I think of it is each of our paths are completely unique and different. Nobody's traveling the same life path. And if you subscribe to reincarnation, then wow, all the more so. On the other hand, as you get farther and farther along on those paths, you start to realize they're all unique, and yet ultimately they're all the same, because it's just the path out of the dream and into awakening. And whatever forms that might seem to take on, in the big picture, they don't really matter all that much. We like them and we cling to them, and they're really important. So yeah, I was a psychiatrist. I still am. I still do a fair amount of therapy, some of it within my foundation.
Yeah.
But we get the experiences we need. Someone might be, I don't know, a recovering gambler. Someone else might have come out of an abusive marriage. Someone else might be a multi-billionaire. Each of those experiences, if they take up the Course and use it and are dedicated to it, each of their experiences will make them uniquely qualified to be the Holy Spirit's ambassador in some area of the world or their life.
I just find that is such a beautiful message. But, I do, considering that it is, we're doing this little chat here in April of 2020, and what is going on in the world right now. We're in the middle of a worldwide virus pandemic, and the entire world is encapsulated in a veil of fear.
Yeah.
And how can anybody watching or listening to this podcast, Dr. Bob, how can they utilize the teachings of A Course in Miracles to undo this veil of fear during an unparalleled time in human history?
Yeah, it really is unparalleled. And in that sense, it's uniquely terrifying for a lot of people, but it's also a unique opportunity to move beyond fear, to transcend it. So I think I would probably, I assume that not everybody listening is a Course in Miracles student.
Right.
And that said, let me start with a more traditional psychotherapeutic response to it. So fear, triggers a fight-flight response. I mean, it's a very primal, basic emotion. And the ultimate fear, which all others distill down to, is fear of death. If I'm afraid that I'm going to blow the job interview, well, what does that mean? That I might not get the job. Well, if you don't get the job, what does that mean? Well, then I might not be able to earn a living. If you don't earn a living, what does that mean? Well, then I won't have any money. If you don't have any money, what does that mean? Well, I won't be able to pay for my house, buy food, etc. Well, if you can't do that, what does that mean? And ultimately, they all distill down to, oh my God, I could die. I could die. So I mean, this is a beautiful window onto the frailty of what A Course in Miracles calls the ego, or what I called in my first book of the Principles of A Course in Miracles series, never mind. And I'm playing with words in the title. It's never mind because it never existed. It always says never. And our best response to it is never mind. But so, what coronavirus has done is exposed in this amazing way the raw insecurity that we all live with all the time. So we just came through the holidays of Passover and Easter. They are all about overcoming death and the fear of death. Easter, very obviously. I mean, in A Course in Miracles, Jesus tells us, I was not punished because you were bad, that it wasn't about the crucifixion at all. The crucifixion is a metaphor for what we all do to ourselves all the time by cutting ourselves off from God. But it's a beautiful example of fear of death. The point is the resurrection. Passover, which I actually wrote an entire book on Exodus called From Plagues to Miracles, the transformational journey of Exodus from the slavery of ego to the promised land of spirit. You can hear the Course's influence in that title.
Yeah.
But Passover too, I mean, the 10th plague that got Pharaoh, that did not get the Hebrews, which is all of us, by the way, because we're all on that journey from slavery to freedom. That 10th plague is death. Everything is going to die. I mean, I'll say to people who say, oh, but the Course paints such a bleak picture of the world. The world's a nice place. Well, when we see it through the eyes of holiness, it's a pretty beautiful place, yeah. But when you think about every animal form that lives has to consume another, that everything that lives will die, including our lovely sun and our galaxy, everything is fated to come to an end. It's the principle of entropy in physics. Or more personally, not only are you going to die, every single person you love is going to die. When you look at it that way, death is ever present. And we do a great job of denying that and distracting ourselves. Yes. But the core lesson of the spiritual path really is, I believe in some way, facing death and overcoming it. This goes back to Castaneda, where he talked about death being over our left shoulder and we have to do all of our things with a view towards that. Well, I think that doesn't mean obsess about death. It means recognize that certain things that you are doing are impermanent. They're not eternal. They won't last. A Course in Miracles tells us in lesson 133 that if something isn't eternal, if it isn't forever, then it's not a value that's even worth going after, which really kind of takes everything that all of us do every day and dumps it in a basket of, oh, that's not terribly worthwhile? Huh, what do we do? So back to coronavirus, it's exposed this survival fear. I had an email from one of my patients who I still work with, who I hadn't heard from in about a month. She'd canceled a few of our phone sessions. And I said, just, what's up? Oh my gosh, I don't have bandwidth for anything else. I'm getting packages and I clean them all and I'm going out with my mask to buy food. And it's kind of like what's happened for many people is this narrowing down that's put us, into pure fight, flight, survival mode. Only there really isn't anything to fight. You can, scrub your packages down and maybe that's the best you can do. There isn't any flight. This isn't like the bubonic plague in London in 1665 where people would leave town for the countryside to get away from it. And of course, they'd bring the plague with them out into the countryside. It's everywhere. So we're kind of in this seemingly stuck place, but I don't know what it's like, where you live, Carl, but here I live near some beautiful walking trails and some great open space with, a view out over the northern part of San Francisco Bay. And usually when I'm walking there, I'll see a few people and we say hi. On a recent Saturday, it looked like the Easter parade, and it wasn't Easter yet.
It's like that here.
Yeah.
It's like that here. Everybody is out walking and
Yeah.
running, and I run, and I know everybody's out running, mainly solo, maybe together, but it's everybody's out in nature again.
Yeah. It's like we've been pulled away from all those busyness to-do list things that just kind of clog up our sense of peacefulness. And if we pause and just take a little breath, 6 feet or more away from other people, of course, or with a mask on, but if we just pause, I think it's so much easier to get to that sense of peace. Now, psychiatrically, I would say most people aren't in fear, they're anxious. What's the difference? Well, fear is a felt present, oh my God, I'm about to be killed. It's coming down. What WTF do I do? Anxiety is an anticipation of that in the future. And that's what we're all doing. I imagine, I've talked to New Yorkers. I have a brother who lives in Manhattan. And there is this sense of, if I go outside, am I going to get it? So outside of the hot zones, I think we're all doing pretty well. The social distancing seems to be working pretty well and all that, but we're anxious. There's this anticipation. What if I get it? When I used to work with anxiety patients, and I did quite a bit, I'd say it was the most of what I would see. I would say to them, the form of anxiety is always a what if proposition. What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen that I really want to happen? What if, what if, what if? And the simplest antidote is just to take the other side and go, well, what if it doesn't? It's just a very simple statement, but it's a balancing act. It's almost like finding your foundation. What if I die? Well, what if you don't? What if you don't?
Well, let me ask you this, if I understand what you're saying. This virus pandemic right now has brought to the forefront humankind's fear to actually stand and face the fear of death and look at it for what it is, and maybe bring us around to understand that there is something else.
That would be my hope. Yeah. Yes, exactly. We're faced with the prospect of death, and it exposes, on the one hand, how ever present it is, and how scary it is, and how inevitable it is, which, as I said, we all avoid it. But, who knows, Carl, maybe people will be watching this on YouTube, decades after you and I are both gone.
Right.
But is that really a form of immortality for us? I mean, I guess in a way, but it doesn't do much for us sitting here today. In order to overcome that fear of death, we have to go to that within us, which, according to A Course in Miracles, does not die. And that is your real self. And the Course spells that with a capital S. That is what the Course calls the Son of God. Was Jesus the Son of God? You bet. Are you and I the Son of God? You bet. We are all equally the Son of God, because the Son of God is this oneness, and we separated and split apart, and in our split condition we do believe we are susceptible to death. Mm-hmm. And yet, when you read people's near-death experiences, those who die clinically and come back, I don't know, those are very impressive to me, that the mind continues in a different aspect after the physical body is dead and it's no longer here.
Well, here's my take on the pandemic. What I see, as we know, as more and more people become enlightened and understand the message and teaching of writings like A Course in Miracles, the ego becomes even more anxious itself. And I see the ego using the pandemic now, and I call this a brilliant but insidious ruse on the ego's part to drive a wedge of separation, a thought of separation, in between every individual, almost 8 billion people on the planet right now. I went to the grocery store yesterday. It was like a sci-fi nightmare, and walked through there, and you can sense that every single person you encounter is afraid of you.
Yeah.
So the ego is using this as I see an opportunity on its part. And as we know, the ego grows stronger from human drama and conflict like this. But the other side of this coin is that Mother Earth is regenerating itself. We see nature becoming more and more clean and clear because people aren't out messing it up. But I've also heard from other people, families and things, for the first time in a long time, people are, even though they're, quote, forced to be together, they're making the best of it. And it may be the first time ever that some families have spent time, quality time with each other. So it's twofold right now, so.
I think you nailed it, brother. I mean, that's exactly it. And so on a macro scale, it's the choice we all face all the time, every day. Do we want to see the world through the eyes of fear, or do we want to see it through the eyes of love and peacefulness? And of course, in Miracles tells us that's pretty much the only real power left to us, is to make that decision. Because, let's face it, we've all swallowed this world of illusion and separation. We've swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Who wasn't? I mean, the whole process of coming out of childhood and growing up is, developing a sense of self. Right. So there's the irony. As a psychiatrist, my job is to try to help people get to the strongest, best sense of self they can. As a Course in Miracles student and teacher, I understand that the only way to do that is to shed the ego's sense of self and discover something different. But I think you nailed it. The beauty of disease and pandemic is, okay, so A Course in Miracles talks about attack, that the ego is all about attack, and it does that in some very covert forms. The beauty of a pandemic is everybody now is a source of attack. They don't even have to do anything. If they breathe on you, if they rub against you, they're a source of attack. They could be killing you. I mean, how more front and center could the ego's world possibly be? So I think you're absolutely right. And yet, I did a Zoom Passover Seder a couple days ago. And unlike regular Seders, where everyone there is pretty local, this had people from California, people from New York, people from other parts of the country. We didn't know each other, but we were all related through the people who had put it together. That could never have happened otherwise. We're seeing people, when I go out on the walking paths, people, we keep our distance, but we smile, we say hello. Of course, it is California. We're friendlier than those Northeast states where I used to live. But I think there is an opportunity. Oh, and the beauty of it, and I hear this over and over on the TV, we're all in it together. So there is that oneness of the shared experience, but is that shared experience, oh my God, we could all be killed by everybody else? Or is that shared experience, yeah, we can come through this, and we're all experiencing the same matrix of death and dying, and yet here we are, we are.
It may actually be the very first time, even understanding how far advanced modern technology is, that, you said a sense of oneness. This may be the very first time we really do, even though we're afraid of each other, but we're all connected as one in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if you live in Guam, or if you live in Sweden, or if you live in Mexico or United States. We're all connected now.
Yes, we are. And that's what allowed the virus to spread so fast, because of international travel. But it's almost, thinking about it now, it's almost like, okay, if we really want to move into that next stage of spiritual growth, we have to recognize, at the very least, our interconnectedness far more than we're doing. I'm not saying we have to get rid of countries and borders and, cities or NBA basketball where one team plays against another. That's all fine, but we do have to recognize that we are all in it together. Every human being is at some level dealing with life challenges and facing a fear of death, and every human being at her or his core is the oneness of love. The Course tells us the opposite of fear is love. but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. I'll say that again. The opposite of fear is love, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. So fear and love appear to be opposites here in the world where everything has contrast and opposites, but in the oneness of God, it just can't play out that way. There's literally no space, no room for it. Nothing, there's nothing else but love. Now that's a tough one for us little-minded human beings to get our heads around.
Yeah.
But it's a very a deeply peaceful thought when you really embrace it and begin to take it in.
It is, and I'm glad you said that. That is beautiful. But going back to the fact that there is still so much conflict in the world because not everybody is cognizant of the oneness. As we know, still the vast majority of the population of the world has a victim mentality. We always look outside. For example, American journalist Anitra Hamper was just stuck for 17 days in India because the locals were basically trying to kill her and her photographer because the Indian government had been saying the outsiders brought it and the foreigners brought it. They were throwing rocks at them and they had to sneak off into the jungle and hide until they could literally escape. So, and I'm sure this is not the only scenario like that. But I think when we come out on the other side of this, it's going to be so much for the better. It's going to take a while to evolve back into a, quote, sense of normalcy, but I don't know if anything will be normal as we used to know it.
Yeah, in a way, I hope it isn't. Because as you said, how would we put it? The forces of division have really, really come forward and shown their ugly face. And it's always an us-them. Well, if it's an us-them, you might be part of your tribe and dissing that other tribe. But you know what? You're also always being dissed by someone else. I'm going to actually talk about this in From Nevermind to Evermind too, that we want to join in groups, but here under the reign of the ego, those groups are defined by opposition to other groups. Right. So it's not really a true oneness or a joining. It's another way of saying those who live by the sword die by the sword, really, in that if you're seeing division, you are divided, your mind is divided, you're going to feel like you're under attack or under siege all the time. As you say, there's that victim consciousness. Someone else is always doing it to you. And if that is the case, if that's your belief, you will never be able to solve a problem because it's never you that's at the center of agency. It's always someone else. So you've got to make someone else do something different. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. One of the beauties of A Course in Miracles is it tells us your job is to change your mind, to shift your perception, and that because all our minds are really joined, when you do that, you open a door to miracles. But a miracle could happen anywhere. It could be some guy in Sri Lanka who's ready for the miracle that your momentary sense of deep peacefulness allows the Holy Spirit to bring through. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we're all truly agents of peace and love. And that when we embody that, we're changing the world.
It's interesting. This morning, I think it was lesson number 340. I read, when I get up, I have my coffee and do my little morning reading. Let me remember that the gifts I give my brothers are the gifts I give myself. So we have to remember that. It's, like you said, when you attack yourself, you attack somebody else, you're attacking yourself, really. And I want to go back to this because you kind of touched about this. Like I said, I just got your book, From Nevermind to Evermind. And it's interesting that I read this yesterday because I've recently been studying and contemplating and writing about finding your true self. And I see in your book says, A Course in Miracles states that all conflict and confusion in this world are ultimately the result of not knowing what we are, of forgetting or intentionally diverting our minds and blocking it out. This is a course in how to know yourself. And then you go on one more sentence. The moment we remember our true self, capitalized here because it is so much more than what we think of as self. All our seeming problems are resolved because they all stem from the one source. I think that's beautiful. I mean, that's got to be our mission, to find out who we really are, who is our true self.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole goal of A Course in Miracles. And, when I wrote Nevermind to Evermind, I was approached by a publisher. They asked if I would write a series on the principles of A Course in Miracles. And I had to think about, so what would be the essence of it? If you take, I mean, it's 1,249 pages in English, if you count the text, the workbook, and the manual for students.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there. What would be its core teaching? And I think the core teaching is, what am I? I mean, A Course in Miracles says, everything knows what it really is, except for us. We've created this false self-concept that needs to be gently and lovingly deconstructed. You can do it all at once. I mean, sounds like you, Carl, and I come from that era where, you could drop 400 mics of acid and deconstruct your self-concept pretty well for a while, and probably with a great deal of fear. But that's not gentle. It's not loving. It's not permanent. And if anything, the ego is great. It comes out of it and goes, wow, here's what I did, and it adds it to its life story. So A Course in Miracles tells us how to do that. And, the lessons, very definitely lead you through the experiences that get you there. But if we're a oneness joined to God, then we have to begin to let that through. Course tells us our job is to sort of, bring illusion back to the truth. As we do that, it's kind of paradoxical in a way. Hold on just a sec. It's paradoxical in a way because the Course says we only have one problem. That problem is separation. Mm-hmm. If you try to resolve your problems at the level of the effect and not the cause, it might look like one gets better, but it doesn't. It just shows up somewhere else in a different form. Whereas when you go to the cause of all the problems, which is our mistaken sense of identity, I always joke, it was a case of mistaken identity. When you go to the cause and start to address that, the problems begin to untangle and resolve on their own. This is a really, really cool and powerful experience, and I think it is what A Course in Miracles talks about as the miracle. We don't do miracles. We allow them to happen when we make a shift internally in how we see other people and ourselves. But what happens is, and I think I write this somewhere in that book, the problem doesn't so much get solved as it just ceases to be. We no longer see it as a problem, or it literally disappears, and it's kind of like, wow, that's just not there anymore. So it's a very different way than what we've learned about how to, make judgments about things and plan and then solve problems. But it is what A Course in Miracles teaches us, and that if we come back to that fundamental learning, what am I? What are you? Who are we? How do we remember that capital S self, that everything else takes care of itself?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have to ask you this simply. Here is Dr. Bob Rosenthal. You are sitting on the board of the modern spiritual guide called A Course in Miracles. Have I read over 3 million copies have been sold and spread around the world. It's translated everywhere. What's the future for this amazing work called A Course in Miracles?
Great question. So A Course in Miracles is in, I think, 27 translations. We have just finally found 2 amazing, remarkable translators that we have been looking for a long time. But the way we find translators is we don't look for them. They show up and we vet them, and either it works out or it doesn't. So we are currently translating the course into Arabic and Farsi, Farsi being Persian, the Iranian language. What's so exciting about this? Well, those parts of the world have had very little opportunity to embrace non-dual spirituality, this sense of oneness. Sufism gets there within the Islamic world, but it's, and you know, I mean, hundreds of millions of people speak Arabic. So that's where we're going with the translations. And we are also in the process of adapting the printed course to the digital world in a way where I don't want to go into all the details because we haven't even figured it out yet, but we're developing what we hope will be a preeminent digital edition of A Course in Miracles that will have amazing functionality far beyond you know, what's out there anywhere now. Not just a simple, gee, I can search the word, you know, forgiveness and, you know, track down the 900 times that it appears or whatever. So those are our two main goals, but our primary function, which was assigned to us by the voice that dictated the course to Helen Schuckman, the voice of Jesus, it's quite literally to publish, distribute, and discuss A Course in Miracles. So we are continuing to publish, and hopefully we will continue to publish. In this time of coronavirus, if you are feeling inspired to make a donation somewhere worthwhile, please go to our website, acim.org. We really can always use help. So we publish, we distribute. Distributing means that we attempt to keep books in print. We subsidize publishing in other countries if we have to. We sponsor the translations. We guide the translators. You know, I don't know Arabic, but I can certainly talk to our Arabic translator about some of the thornier sort of linguistic questions that come up. For example, A Course in Miracles uses a lot of capitalized terms, and it capitalizes pronouns like he and him when it's talking about God or the Holy Spirit. Farsi and Arabic, there are no capital letters. They don't use them. So how the heck do you make that translation? Fascinating problem. So we publish, we distribute, and we discuss. Discussing feels very much like a big piece of what I'm here for. And I would never have said that in the past, but I do feel that given my long history with A Course in Miracles, my relationship with Bill Thetford, one of its scribes, who really was my mentor, and the insights that I've been fortunate to get through my psychotherapy experience, that I'm writing books, I'm doing this talking, I'll answer student questions when I'm so guided, because I am a pretty busy person these days, which is ironic. I left this wonderful job as a psychotherapist where when I got home, I was free. And now my to-do list, you know, I could put it up on 5 different lists all over the place.
People asking you to be on podcasts, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's the part I love, Carl. So this is a delight, you know, whereas, you know, looking over a contract or a trademark registration, saying, you know.
You know, I've got to ask you this. I still run into people, and I'm like you. I assume that people who are watching this or listening, there's a lot of first-time people who've never even heard of A Course in Miracles or non-dualistic spirituality, that type of thing, and they're all going, "What?" That type of thing. I still run into a fair amount of people who, for whatever the reason, confuse A Course in Miracles with religion. Simply because it's written in Christian terms, but it's more similar to the Buddhism's teaching. You know, do you encounter this?
Absolutely. So Bill Thetford, one of the Course's 2 scribes, called A Course in Miracles the Christian Vedanta.
Yes, right. I've heard Gary Renard say that too.
Yeah. It is Advaita Vedanta, which is a non-dual there's only Brahman. What's not Brahman doesn't exist, and the self is no different than Brahman, to quote Shankara, an 8th century Vedanta mystic. So A Course in Miracles is exactly that. But it's bringing it to us in the West using Christian words and terms that most are familiar with. That's the good news and the bad news, because those terms are buzzwords for many, many people. And, my wife and I wrote a How to Study A Course in Miracles guide that will be available through our website very soon, that gives people a very abbreviated glossary of some of the main terms that we figured, if you knew this going in, if you knew when the Course uses the word Christ, capital C, it's not talking about Jesus. It's talking about the oneness that's all of us and that God created sinless. When the Course in Miracles talks about forgiveness, it's not talking about forgiveness as we experience it. Oh, you did something terrible to me, but I'm so much superior to you, I'll deign to forgive you, you miserable little worm. It's talking about the process
I shouldn't
by which
laugh.
you let go. What? I'm sorry.
I shouldn't laugh. That's not.
No, we shouldn't, and I shouldn't have said it. But let's face it.
That's true. Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's talking about the process by which we release our grievances to the Holy Spirit, because we want to see our relationships through different eyes. That's what my second book is all about, From Loving One to One Love. It's about relationships and healing relationships and moving through grievances, whether that's, my kid left a dirty dish in the sink, or whether that's my whole family was wiped out in a genocide and I'll never forgive those people. We've got to be doing that work. And with that, I forget where I was going, so I'll bring it back to you.
Well, I mean, this is we're talking to Dr. Bob Rosenthal, the co-president of the Foundation for Inner Peace, author of 3 books that I know of. And let me find out, because you said you've written 2 books so far, but it's supposed to be a 5-book series. Are you just scheduled to do one a year, that type of thing?
There's not really a time. I mean, it's a loose time frame. So the goal would be one about every year and a half. So the first 2 have been released. I'm currently supposedly hard at work on the 3rd one. My writing often takes a backseat to everything else, which I have to get over that. So there will be 3 more, and I do have a pretty good sense of what they'll be. The next one will not be as linear as the first 2. Never Mind to Evermind, it was a straight shot. It just came to me. It lined itself up. I'm very pleased with how it came out. The second, From Loving One to One Love, felt like more of a hodgepodge. When I went back to it, I had to cut a great deal of material because it was just repetitive. I'd already said it, and I'd forgotten that I'd said it. But I'm very happy with where it got to. It's less linear, but it's still making certain points, and people seem to be liking it a great deal. The 3rd book, I'm just going to be writing about different topics in forgiveness, such as freedom or the body, healing. I haven't even figured out all of the topics yet. The 4th book, I'm thinking about doing it in kind of a fictionalized Q&A form, where there's this diner in South Jersey, where there are many diners, where a small group gather to hear about A Course in Miracles from someone who's really just tapped in, and it's all, basically the student and the guru talking back and forth. That should be a lot more fun, brings me back to my screenwriting days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 4th book is something that I started writing a long time ago and let go of when I started with this series, but I think it'll come back, and it's basically kind of coming at the whole edifice of A Course in Miracles from a very different perspective that I don't want to say any more about it because, but I think it'll be a good one. So I've got my work cut out for me.
No spoiling it.
No spoiling, right? No spoiler alert on that one.
And do you have an idea for the fifth book already? I mean,
Oh yeah, no, the fifth book,
oh,
as I said, I've already written part of it.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I have to say, as I mentioned at the start, I just got from Nevermind to Evermind, transforming the self to embrace miracles, and already I like the way that you write simply because it's simple. You write simply so that it's not complex, and I love the reference to the kids' stories. The one
Oh,
with the
thank
baby,
you. Yes.
the baby bird that fell out of the nest. That's a beautiful
That's the
analogy there.
separation, right? There it is.
What was the name of that story?
That story is Are You My Mother?
Yes, yeah,
The classic.
yeah. And
I think I remember it from when I was young, and I certainly read it to both my kids many a time, because it goes to this core fear that kids have. What if I get separated from my parents? But that is our core fear. We did get separated from our one parent, the oneness that is God. So yeah, I like using the kids' stories, and all through it, I tried to use metaphor. I shared a lot of personal stories, because that's what brings it to life. That's what makes it real for us. So I would say, if you have not picked up A Course in Miracles, and it can be a very daunting book, and you want to enter it with a better understanding, the two books that I tell people, I mean, when people ask me, are Gary Renard's Disappearance of the Universe,
right.
which I think is just a wonderful book and a classic, and has literally brought more people to A Course in Miracles than any other book, including Marianne Williamson's work, which was also very helpful at. And I think, From Nevermind to Evermind, because it doesn't use the heavily Christian terminology. And once you understand what the principles are, now you can, sort of plug and play and get to, oh, Christ, I know what it's saying. Oh, okay. Healing. Well, healing isn't just of the body. That too, the Course will it'll open up and be a lot easier. It has some very dense places in it, but it has so much beauty and so much transformative stuff. The more deeply I go into it, and I was an English lit major, so I am certainly a big fan of beautiful writing and literature, Shakespeare, etc. And I think A Course in Miracles is literally the greatest work ever written in any language anywhere.
Yeah.
Better than Shakespeare, better than Proust in French, better than, you name it.
And it's written in the Shakespeare style with iambic pentameter too.
Yeah, it came through in iambic pentameter. Not all of it. The early sections, not. And personally, I think there are a couple of lines there where Helen may have had to force it a little bit to keep it in iambic pentameter, but it is pretty remarkable. Yes, it has a meter to it.
It is, yeah. And I agree with you. Many of my friends who've never read A Course in Miracles, I say, go read Gary Renard's Disappearance of the Universe first, before you dive into it. Because I met Gary at one of his workshops way back in 2007, and we were even just chatting when I had him sign my book. And we both said, when we first started reading it, was like reading in a foreign language. We both said, what is this stuff,
It is like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a foreign language because it's written in it's not archaic English, but Helen was born in 1909 and she learned her grammar then. One of my little pet peeves and current projects is going through the whole course and correcting the incorrect use of semicolons, because if you go back to the 19th century, semicolons were used all over the place, and now we have very clear rules about what they're supposed to do, and they pop up in the darndest places in the course. And to me, it's kind of like, here's this great spiritual work, and they're using this. It's embarrassing. It'd be like going to a great guru, and she gets up to leave, and she's got a piece of toilet paper, hanging off her butt or something. The Course. I want to bring it up that way, but there's certain aspects of it. We're often asked by people who are really bugged by its use of male gendered pronouns, the he and him for God. I get it. I mean, God doesn't have a gender. The Holy Spirit doesn't have a gender. In truth, none of us have a gender. Our bodies have gender, but spirit has no gender.
Yeah.
So people ask, well, would you change it? Can you bring it up into, talk they and them, and, and we do everything by guidance. We sit and we ask and we listen, and we generally, almost uniformly, get variations on the same answer. And every time we ask about that, we get no. Helen Schuckman herself said the course came in this language because it's here to reinterpret Christianity. The church, the early church, got it wrong. They took Jesus' original teachings, which you can find in the New Testament, but you have to look hard for them. So the course is here to do that. And it said, if you're going to address a system, you need to use the same language that system used. So people know the King James version of the Bible, and they know all the God as He.
Yeah.
That's why the course addresses it that way. And anything that comes up that's bugging you in any way, it's a forgiveness opportunity and a lesson in how the ego makes judgments. But I agree, Disappearance of the Universe is a great intro. I think I've written a pretty good intro, coming in a very, very different way than Gary's book. So I would certainly recommend it.
Well, Dr. Bob Rosenthal, we've been talking to him. Bob, we've had you here for almost an hour, and I promise not to take up more time than that. And we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of beautiful ground. I'm glad that we addressed the things that needed to be talked about during this incredible time in the world with the virus pandemic. And I hope that people that watch and listen to this will find some solace and some hope and some love in this. And you have a website that people can go to find out more about you?
Yeah, so if you would like to find out a little more about me, my books, check out excerpts from my books, see what I was doing when I was trying to be a novelist and writing books that weren't Course in Miracles based, but sort of new agey thrillers. Go to my website, which is Dr. Bob, D-R-B-O-B, no period, D-R-B-O-B -author, drbobauthor.com. And that'll bring it up. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles and its history, or anything that the Foundation's doing, if you want to sample the workbook lessons, we have them all up for free on our website, and not just in English, but in English, German, French, Spanish, Swedish, Czech, lot of different languages. Go to the Foundation for Inner Peace website, which is acim.org, acim.org, and try the different it's an interesting website because we weren't trying to design it with a marketing perspective, but look at resources, look at events. We are now doing 2 webinars a month. One of them is me pretty much exclusively. They've been very well attended. We get over 1,000 signups for each one, and in the area of 200 to 400 people attending live. Answer a lot of questions from students about A Course in Miracles. So you can find old ones recorded on our YouTube channel. You can also find a lot of my talks on my YouTube page, which is Robert Rosenthal, MD. It got set up long ago when that was my only Google email. And, who knew that I'd be Dr. Bob -author. So it's a little confusing, but at Robert Rosenthal, MD, I've got tons of audio that I put up with slideshows for the video, and our webinars, and some real fun talks like this one about my books, about course topics. That's a great place to start as well.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that the A Course in Miracles is available in so many different translated languages, because being the host and producer of this podcast, World Awakenings, I can see all the countries in the world where people listen to this, and they're all over the world. I recently just noticed that there were 16 listens in Morocco. So once it gets put in Persian, that would be even great. Arabic. But Bob, thank you so much. Like I said, I still believe, like the ACIM says, there's no order of difficulty in miracles. How else could I have got you on this podcast? So I appreciate it.
Truly, Carl, my pleasure. I love doing this. I've always said that the core unit of transformation is a relationship, that you don't get there individually, which is where A Course in Miracles differs from all the Hindu teachings. And what better way to explore it than in the relationship of an interview? That's why I like this format so much. We do it together. We get ideas together. It goes in directions. I asked Carl, I said, are you going to have any particular topic? He said, oh, no, I have questions, but I like to let it go where it goes. I feel the exact same way. So this is a blessing and a pleasure, and I thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bob Rosenthal on World Awakenings, episode number 26, I think. Anyway, thank you again, Bob. Much love and light to you, brother.
Same, brother. Thank you.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in each and every episode of this podcast, World Awakenings, as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that all the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things metaphysical and spiritual, and just how they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment everyday life. Much love and light to you, my friend. Thank you for tuning in.